Man, this MIDI keyboard literally does everything. It comes with a built-in FM synth, an 8-pattern sequencer, audio over USB so it acts as an audio interface. It also has a built-in battery and Bluetooth for wireless operation, and it can even receive audio via Bluetooth and output it through the audio output, so it works as a Bluetooth audio receiver. Crazy! At first I read it as M-Wave, but it's called the M-Vave SMK37 Pro, and I paid €71 or around $83 for this on AliExpress, and this was with VAT included, by the way, and free shipping. Absolutely insane value. But surely so many features at such a low price means there is something wrong with it, right? Well, let's see. Now, the build quality is good. I would say probably a bit less good than a more well-known product like Arturo's Minilab 3, but certainly good enough for the price, and it's reasonably sturdy even if it's really light. On the back we have a 3.5mm audio output for the built-in synth, but more importantly, it enables this keyboard to work as a class-compliant USB audio device. So it's perfect for producing on an iPad or another mobile device that lacks audio outputs. So you just connect it with the USB-C port and it provides both audio and MIDI, so you don't have to deal with dongles and adapters. And we also have a sustain pedal input and a 3.5mm MIDI output. And unlike most keyboards at this size and price, it features actual pitch bend and mod wheels instead of touch strips. However, these are not all that great, to be honest, but still better than touch strips. They get the job done. And the big bright display next to them, surprisingly, not only shows you parameters and values, but it also has a chord detection feature. So it displays the name of the chord that you're playing, and it's pretty accurate. So this is yet another unexpected feature. Now, the endless encoders, they feel okay. The faders are a bit wobbly, but overall for the price I have no complaints, and you can switch between two banks for the faders, the knobs and the pads. The 37 velocity sensitive mini keys have this lightweight, springy action. Nothing to write home about really, but overall for me they are good enough for such a keyboard. They are not too stiff or spongy or unstable and wobbly like some other cheap keyboards. And also like some other mini keyboards, controlling velocity and playing softly with these isn't too easy, but you can select between 4 velocity curves in the software editor, as the default one was way too sensitive. Overall, for making beats and playing synths and basic keys, you'll be fine with these, but maybe, you know, get something else for your piano recitals. Now the pads, I think this is the really weak spot of this keyboard. They simply suck for finger drumming, and even if they did improve a bit after I changed the velocity curve in the editor, they're not very sensitive. In the editor they also have this pad calibration mode, but it didn't make any difference for me. In my last review I mentioned that the pads on the Sinido Tempo Pad C16 have a tiny amount of latency and let me tell you, the pads on the Tempo Pad are way better than these. These have even more noticeable latency even in wired mode. And I'm not talking about Bluetooth latency here, they just don't feel responsive no matter how low I've set the buffer size in my DAW. And it's like the latency isn't even consistent, and sometimes my taps just fail to register. So for finger drumming, honestly, I would just use the keys. Why do you even need these pads if they're so bad? However, the keys do feel like they too have a tiny amount of latency, but it's less noticeable than the pads. Their only redeeming quality is that you can change them to send CC messages instead of notes, so you can map them to some features in your DAW and use them as buttons such as transport controls. M-Vave's older 25-key keyboard has automatic DAW control through the Mackie control surface, but I couldn't find a way to enable it on this one, even though the bottom row of pads have these labels for the DAW controls. And generally the features of the keyboard aren't well documented. The included printed manual is very brief, So if anyone knows anything about DAW control on this keyboard, please let us know down in the comments. But hey, I personally am willing to forgive the quality of the pads considering how much we get for our money here. We have assistive playing tools like scales, chord mode, and an arpeggiator. And all of this can be used without any cables via the Bluetooth connection. I am not a huge fan of that though, as I personally can feel the Bluetooth latency. It's not that this particular one is worse than other Bluetooth controllers, it's just that a really tight response is important for me personally, so I'm not willing to give that up in the name of wireless convenience. But hey, that's just me. For many people it will probably be fine. Now, one thing that's pretty remarkable for the price is that since the keyboard features audio over USB, you can record the built-in synth directly through the USB-C connection. It appears as both input and output device in your DAW, so it's essentially an audio interface which works great, at least on Mac, and for Windows I haven't tested it, but it doesn't have its own custom ASIO driver, and you will have to use a generic solution like ASIO for all to get reasonable latency performance on Windows, which isn't too good to be honest. But man, I think it's really crazy that it can also work as a Bluetooth audio receiver, which makes operation completely wireless. However, don't get your hopes up when you add the Bluetooth audio latency to the MIDI latency. It's just too much, so I wouldn't recommend using it in this matter. It's like they were just flexing how many features they can cram for the price. So, is the synth actually any good? Okay, let's keep our expectations in check here. You can't expect a beast of a synth from such a cheap keyboard, and it's not. It's a DX7 emulation, so it does have some usable FM pianos, bells, brasses, and other polyphonic patches, but the basses are overall pretty mid for my taste. And sometimes you may get these clicks and pops when playing it. Personally, it didn't bother me much as it doesn't happen all the time, usually right after you change a patch, so it's not a showstopper. But it's also not super responsive. Again, it feels like there's a slight lag when playing the synth. Still, you can import presets into the synth. I successfully imported some of the presets that come with Dext, a free DX7 emulator for Mac and Windows, and since Dext is open source, people online are speculating that the built-in synth is actually using the Dext source code, and while I couldn't get Dext to work as an editor for the synth, the presets I imported from it really showed the potential of the built-in synth, as they are quite a bit better than what the keyboard ships with. I couldn't find any info on the max polyphony, but I can play extended chords without a problem. You don't have access to the full synth engine though, but you can change the algorithm and feedback to alter the sounds, and you do have an effects section with a low pass filter, distortion, reverb and delay, but they only have very basic amount controls, but still better than nothing. Now, one caveat is that while holding the parameters or effects button, these buttons here, to edit the sounds, the keys don't trigger the sound. So you have to edit the sound and then let go of the button, and then you can press the keys to audition the changes you've made to your patch. Something which would be unforgivable on a proper synth, but on a keyboard like this, the synth is just a bonus, so whatever. But overall, it's not a bad synth, and it sounds even better when you process it with some high quality effects in your DAW. Here's how that would sound. So the 8-pattern sequencer has a drum and key modes and even advanced features like swing. To be honest, I personally always use a proper sequencer when making music, so I haven't explored it much. And I understand that combined with the built-in synth, it makes the keyboard a self-contained device, but I wish they would have spent the money and resources to improve the more essential features of the keyboard instead of adding so many bells and whistles. But hey, let's be realistic, it's hard to complain for the price. You can find this keyboard for anywhere between 70 and 110 euro, and it's even sold under another brand and model name, the E-Rock MKE P37, which, as far as I can tell, comes with a carrying case, while this one doesn't. So yeah, man, the world of cheap AliExpress keyboards is full of surprises, and the value of this particular one is insane. So should you buy the M-Vave SMK37 Pro? Maybe. For the price I paid, and even for a slightly higher price, it's worth it if you need a 3-octave mini keyboard with wheels instead of touch strips. It's especially useful for iPad music producers because of the audio output it provides for wired operation, and then there's also the option to use it wireless via Bluetooth. But it does have some latency even in wired mode, which is most noticeable on the pads and when playing the built-in synth, but it's also present but less noticeable when just playing with the keys in your DAW. So calling it Pro is overselling it for sure. And that's something you should consider if you're sensitive to latency. But that may not be a problem for people who would get this keyboard to just use it for wireless operation only, because Bluetooth does add a bit of lag regardless of what keyboard you buy, so you will have latency anyways. So if your intention is to use it only with Bluetooth, I would say it's definitely a good keyboard to get. It's totally fine. But I think these manufacturers are getting ahead of themselves, cramming so much stuff into these MIDI controllers, but failing to get the basics right, like having no latency in wired mode. That's why I wouldn't use it as my main keyboard, but for something compact to occasionally carry when traveling, it's okay. It does the job. But if you can live without what I would consider to be the extra features like synth, audio output, wireless operation, and can spend a bit more, I would say an Akai MPK Mini Plus or a Novation Launch Key Mini Mark IV are generally more polished 3-octave keyboards. They do get the basics right, so they're probably the wiser choice if you don't insist on working without cables. But what do you think about this keyboard? Let us know down in the comments, or if you have any questions about it. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you are new here, and I will catch you later.